All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm Casey Dixon. I'm the Marcom specialist for Signature MD, and we're really excited to have everyone here with us today to discuss the importance of maintaining muscle mass as we age. Research suggests that adults between the ages of 50 and 70 can lose as much as 30% of their total muscle mass, making it more important than ever to understand how to stay strong and healthy and active over time. So, to help us explore this topic, we are joined by Dr. Robert Zaid. He is a Signature MD affiliated physician based in Novi, Michigan, just outside of Detroit. Dr. Zaid is a board certified medical family medicine physician and a graduate of the University of Michigan and Michigan State University Medical School. He completed his residency training at Genesis Regional Medical Center and has extensive experience caring for patients across all stages of life. So, Dr. Zaid will be sharing his insights on how muscle mass changes with age and how you can have some practical strategies to help maintain your strength and overall health as you age. So, Dr. Zaid, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Casey. I am so happy to be here, and I've been looking forward to this all week. I'm used to doing lectures live, so if I don't hear you laugh, I'll have to laugh at my own jokes. But it's probably better because my wife tells me my jokes aren't funny, so I'll probably have to limit them tonight. Anytime I do a lecture or a presentation, I like to have a little outline, and the outline will be on the left side of my presentation. Tonight, I want to talk about muscles and aging. I want to talk about something called the Centenarian Decathlon, what causes muscle loss. And then, a lot of people are excited about these weight loss drugs. I want to talk about how they work and how we caution patients to get the best results. I want to finish with some mindfulness and then kind of review some of the things that we talk about. Hopefully, we'll get this done not too long, and I'll try to be not too technical, but technical enough. So I'll start with a little graphic I made here. We live in wonderful times. We can make a lot of money and take care of our families without needing to do much physical activity. They say health is wealth, but you can also have wealth without health. The problem with sitting or having a more sedentary lifestyle than we did 50 years ago is that we're not working out our muscles as much. And so sometimes that can really create a situation where we're not as healthy as we were 50 years ago. So we're going to have to be a little bit more mindful about that. As Casey had suggested, a big reason why I want to talk about muscles today is because we do tend to lose muscle as we age. And I talk to patients all the time about preparing today for situations that are going to happen 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now. And the stats show pretty consistently that you can lose 1 to 2% of muscle every year in your early 50 to 60, your fifth and sixth decades of life. And it could be as much as, 3 to 5% a year in later decades. A lot of studies show that at 90 years of age, some people can lose 50% of their muscle, and that has some significant results. We're going to talk about a lot of that today. In 2016, this was such a big deal that sarcopenia, or loss of muscle and strength, became its own diagnostic code. So when you go to your doctor's office and you're sitting for your physical, a lot of times they talk about making sure you get enough exercise and nutrition. And we hear that all the time. And that sometimes when you hear it over and over again, it can become something that just kind of goes in one ear and out the other ear. I always like to focus on the why. And if any of you guys haven't listened to it yet, there's a really good TED Talk by Simon Sinek who talks about the why. If we understand why we need to do things, a lot of times we're more on board with it. So this is my favorite slide of the whole presentation. And this sets up everything else. Again, I'm going to try not to be too technical, but it kind of excites me and inspires me to even get to the gym. Why is muscle important? We our muscle, creates a lot of energy, and it's the place where metabolism happens. 80% of insulin activity happens in our skeletal muscle. And when you contract your muscles, 5 times the amount of glucose gets entered into your muscle without the use of insulin. It's so profound that it could take up to 48 hours for that activity to go away, which is huge. Lately, patients come to me and they start asking about peptides. Doc, I heard about these peptides. I want to take peptides. What I remind them is that there are over 100 peptides in your muscle right now that are doing all kinds of things. When you exercise and when you build muscle, some of the most important peptides are ones that can, um, you know, increase insulin sensitivity, which means that the insulin in your body becomes more powerful. You don't want insulin resistance, you want insulin sensitivity. There are peptides in your muscles that can decrease fat. They increase fat metabolization. And I could tell you what they are, like IL-6, IL-15, but these are not things I want you to remember. And then there's peptides that decrease inflammation, which is huge. People think of inflammation as bad, but inflammation is needed. If you didn't have an immune system and you were sick or you got injured or you had a cut, you wouldn't be able to heal without inflammation in your immune system. Problem is too much inflammation is what can cause problems. So when we think about what a muscle can do, if I'm going to the gym and I'm thinking about it pulling in sugar, decreasing fat, decreasing inflammation, improving my cardiac status, that excites me. That gets me wanting to go to the gym. One of the other things it does is it does organ protection. How does it do it? Glucose going into your muscle gets turned into glycogen. Glycogen is storage. Glycogen does not cause atherogenesis or blockages of your blood vessels. Sugar and fat do. So if you could exercise and pull sugar into storage, that's fantastic. Now, how does that help you? There are studies that if somebody were in an ICU and they didn't have, the amount of muscle that they needed based on their age, they call that sarcopenia, that you typically have 1.2 days longer on a ventilator, 1.3 days longer in the ICU, and 2.7 days longer in the hospital. And what does that mean? Every day that you're sitting in an ICU, God forbid, I hope none of you guys are in an ICU, but we need to think about how to prevent morbidity. Every day is 7 days of recovery. So if we had more muscle and we have more energy and it helps us recover faster, it's just one more thing to plan for 10, 20, 30 years before you have a problem. Now, I put cardiovascular health on here, and that's important because when we think about the risk factors for heart disease, the 5 major risk factors are family history, age, diabetes, smoking, blood pressure. Well, you can't do anything about age and family history. We can do things about sugar and cholesterol and blood pressure. So if you have more muscle and you're pulling more sugar in and you're reducing your fat, more muscle just by itself is decreasing 2 of the major risk factors. Add on to it the peptides are inhibiting inflammation, right? So when I talked about inflammation before, I said it was great for healing and it was great for if you had like a cut. But where inflammation is not good is if you don't really have anything that needs to be fixed. Sugar and fat create inflammation. More muscle decreases inflammation, which means that you have better cardiovascular health. Everybody focuses on the heart, but anything that could affect the heart can affect any blood vessel in your body, your brain, your heart, your kidneys, your toes. So really, it's overall organ health when you have more muscle compared to fat and sugar. And then finally, independence and mobility. This is huge. Your muscles are supporting your skeleton. And if you don't have enough muscle to get you to be able to ambulate or walk, How are you going to travel to Italy? I always tell my patients, do you want to walk through Pompeii or do you want somebody pushing you through a wheelchair? And so it may happen anyway, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to prevent it, we're trying to prolong it, we're trying to unlock a bonus decade. So, just to reiterate, consequence of loss of having not enough muscle is disability, frailty, increased fall risk and fractures. So, there's something really interesting. They did studies on grip strength, and they said that every 5 kilograms, so when they measure grip strength, they do it with a dynamometer, which you squeeze your hand and you can see how many kilograms you're able to produce, and it's based on the force that you're pulling on that machine. Every 5 kilogram decrease in grip strength correlates to about 17% increase in cardiovascular risk. And so what's interesting about that is that they've had studies of 500,000 people in it, and they've done prospective studies where they looked at several studies, and all of them show the same thing. I don't know that it's necessarily grip strength, but grip strength is a marker indirectly of how much muscle you have because you need, if you're working out your muscle, you're also working out your grip. It was so profound that it was a better indicator for heart disease than systolic blood pressure. Now, I'm not saying systolic blood pressure is not important. It was just statistically more powerful than blood pressure was in terms of predicting cardiovascular disease. Having not enough muscle can increase hospitalization rates. We talked about ICU. It can increase insulin resistance and diabetes, which to me is another motivator. If I could exercise and I have a five-fold increase of sugar coming into my muscle, and 48 hours later, I'm still helping that process, I would rather do that today than think about having to take anything for diabetes in the future. And that to me is one of those like alerts that gets me motivated. If we had a heart attack, you know, it's real easy to make changes, but how do you, when you're healthy and not having any problems, get motivated to make changes? Maybe it's, excitement for seeing a kid graduate or a grandkid graduate, or maybe it is the fear of having diabetes. I don't care what you use for motivation, but find some motivation to make some change. And then, of course, you're reducing resilience to illness and overall cause mortality goes up when your muscle goes down. So this was my favorite slide. I feel like that's important because it gives the why of why we need muscle. Now let's move on. We turned to our patients into goal setting, whenever we can. And this is something that I borrowed from Peter Attia. He talks a lot about the Centenarian Decathlon. What this means is that we need to think about where we want to be when we're 90 or 100. Some people look at me and they're like, I don't want to live to 90 or 100, doc. And I tell them that's because you're thinking about the people you know today. But if we have cures for dementia and arthritis and anything else that ails you, and you can live a quality life and get an extra 10 years, why wouldn't you want to? Absolutely, we would, right? So then if our goal is to ride a bike when we're 100 or 90 or 80, or we want to travel with suitcases or we want to pick up grandkids, then instead of working out to just gain muscle, which if you look at my last slide, I still think that's fantastic, work out to get muscle. We should also be working out for function. So if you want to ride a bike for an hour when you're 80, maybe today you need to ride it for an hour and a half. If you want to travel and you want to carry your suitcases and you want to put them up in the plane by yourself, then maybe you should be doing farmer walks with weight that's probably 20 or 30% more than what your suitcase would be. And so you can work backwards. It's just math. If we know how much or what percent muscle loss you're going to lose between now and 80, then we can just figure out how much more muscle you need now to make sure you have a little reserve. And even if you don't hit your target or you overshoot it, the whole idea is we need to work towards this. We cannot wait until it's too late to make these decisions. And the kind of thought process that can help you reduce some of those risks we talked about when you don't have muscle. So here's another fun slide for me, and maybe it's the nerd in me that enjoys it, but hopefully you guys get something out of it as well. So how do we lose muscle? What is happening in our body that's causing us to lose muscle? You know, as you get older, sometimes there's protein imbalance. You're not eating as much protein, or you could be that way if you're younger. I know some kids that don't eat enough protein. So making sure you have enough protein in your diet is essential. There are some things that happen to men and women as they get older. You know, it's possible we lose testosterone and estrogen. Growth hormone can decrease. Sometimes cortisol can increase, and then vitamin D can decrease. So it's good to kind of take a look at these. Testosterone builds muscle, estrogen builds muscle. When you lose them, it may make it harder for you to gain muscle. Growth hormone, I'm not messing with that. If, like I don't really, there's a lot of things I worry about with negative feedback, but, there's certain things you can't really do too much with right now, but people do lose some growth hormone. And then cortisol can go up if you're stressed or you have illness. Cortisol actually increases sugar, which can increase, you know, fat and increase atherogenesis. So ways to reduce stress are always positive in that respect. Then if we move to like nerve deterioration, your nerves in your body are wires that allow your muscles to contract. Contraction, like we talked about on that second or third slide, um, releases peptides that help you build muscle. So if you have nerves that are damaged and you're not stimulating muscle, you can get muscle loss that way. One of the age-related nerve deteriorations is something called spinal stenosis, which has to do with how the nerves exit your spine. As you get older, if you've got a lot of weight on your body, or it could be genetic too, and you're pulling on the bony spinous processes on the vertebral bodies in your back, your body doesn't want them to break off. So what it does is it sends calcium there to kind of reinforce it, and you can get like a bird's beak right where the nerve exits the spine. And if it's pushing too much or pinching too much on that nerve, you're not getting as much firing and the muscle can deteriorate. So it would be fantastic if my neurosurgery friends one day would figure out how to get rid of those bones. We're not there yet. So right now, one more reason to say have more muscle. So if you start to lose muscle, you're losing excess and not reserve. The mitochondria are the energy producers in the body. They produce ATP, they give you energy, they help you move, and if you, with age, they can decrease. One of the things that has been proven to increase mitochondria and to keep them alive longer is exercise. And that is one more reason to make sure that you start coming up with a good exercise program. There are some people that say that red light can help it. And when I was researching for this presentation, there is some good research that says red light can stimulate some parts of the mitochondria, but the studies are not great about how much red light, how to do it. And so I'm not ready to recommend that at this point, but we should stay tuned and see what kind of research comes out with it. And then chronic inflammation is something that can cause muscle loss. And again, if you remember, I want inflammation to heal my wounds. I don't want the sugar and fat in my body. And we're not talking about gluten, but I don't want any inflammation to rob me of my muscle. And it almost becomes like a cycle. As you get older, if you lose some muscle and some of those cells die, and some of the fat cells come in and you get more inflammation and you have less muscle, less peptides, you can continually decline your muscle. And when the fat takes over and the sugar takes over, there's all kinds of studies that say your risk of diabetes goes way up. And we don't want anything else that's going to cause you to have vascular disease. And diabetes is a big one. So again, less fat, less sugar in the muscle, better metabolic situation. Here's the why. And with that why, can we do something about it? Fat infiltration, I just talked about with the chronic inflammation. They kind of go together because it's the fat that oftentimes is causing the inflammation in the muscles. So let's talk about GLPs for a second. In my, if you don't, I'm going to go quick with this because not everybody is on a GLP or wants to be on one, but real simply, the GLPs cause food in the stomach to stay in there longer. And when food stays in your stomach longer, it stretches the stomach. When it stretches the stomach, it tells the brain that you're full. These have been great for weight loss. You can see the stats on my slide. I'm not going to go through it. But what's not good is that a lot of people that take them are losing muscle. And that really concerns me. So before I started using the GLPs, I realized that if people are going to restrict calories because you're stopping the food noise, we need to make sure that what calories go in are protein. So I tell my patients, I will not put you on one of these medications unless you follow these protein rules. And when they do, we've gotten great results. Because if you're eating enough protein, you're focusing on muscle and it's very possible to lose 80–90% of your weight as fat and not muscle. I'll show you in a little bit. So when you're on a GLP, some of the things that, we talk about is making sure that people are using resistance training 3 times a week. We push that they optimize protein intake. And I try to get people to do at least 30% of their BMR, their basal metabolic rate, or 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram. Honestly, 1.2 grams per kilogram probably is enough, but if you shoot for 1.2 and some days you get to zero point 0.8 or zero point 0.9, then you're not going to hit that target. So if somebody's having difficulty, we might shoot for a higher target knowing that 1.2 would be just fine. And I don't focus on leucine rich proteins. Those are the best for your muscles. But if you're eating that much protein, you're going to get enough leucine. If somebody were vegetarian, we may have to be a little bit more careful with that. And we live in a beautiful world right now. So if you wanted, you could go to AI, ChatGPT, and ask for a list of different foods and their protein content. You just might want to double check some of it because sometimes AI does hallucinate. But honestly, the best way would be to go talk to your physician. And then we monitor muscle. We like to monitor muscle function, look at body composition. And then we always have a weaning off of the GLPs. But you really should not have rebound weight gain if while on the medication, you're changing the habits because those habits, if you did it without the medication, would help you lose weight. Problem is, if you go from a high dose GLP to nothing, those food cravings can come back strong. So you kind of want to wean them off. So, how do we measure muscle? You could do it in many ways. There's DEXA scans, InBody. I've looked at them both. As far as I'm concerned, neither one is perfect, and they may be off by a little bit, but it doesn't matter to me and my patients because we're looking for trends. We're looking for trends over time. I want to make sure that with the weight loss, we're not losing muscle. So an InBody, for example, can separate out skeletal muscle from body fat and body water, and it can break down different parts of the body. I'm going to show you an example of an InBody. So the screen's kind of small. If you can see my cursor, and I know nobody can tell me if they can, the top part of the sheet um, breaks down absolute values. And when we look at this middle section, we're looking for skeletal muscle to outpace weight and body fat. Most people have this kind of a shape where it's a little bit of a C, and we try to push them so that the skeletal muscle percentile goes well past body fat and weight. I skip over BMI. I don't think it's a good value. You could have a very high BMI, and it could be because you have a lot of muscle. And I think we need to stop using BMI and we need to look more at body composition. That's my opinion. Percent body fat, I don't focus on either because we're coming up with a plan. This fourth section here is where you could separate out upper body from lower body. And what's interesting is I see a lot of people, not everyone, who have weaker legs and upper body, and the legs are so important for core strength and mobility. And also, your quadricep is your largest muscle. So if we're talking about increasing muscle to decrease sugar, to decrease fat, we need to really make sure we do not ignore our legs. And then there's a few more things on here, basal metabolic rate, visceral fat, but I don't want this to be just about the InBody. I'm just going to show you. Here's an example of one of my patients, and she actually came in 2 days ago. I'll tell you what the third mark looks like. I didn't get to add it. She lost here 26 pounds on her first 3 months. She was working hard. Only 4 pounds were muscle. So that means that she lost 22 pounds of fat, which is fantastic. The third time she came in, she lost another 9 pounds and gained zero point 0.2 um, pounds of muscle, which is great. Maintaining muscle and losing weight, that's exactly what you want to do. And how did she do it? With a lot of hard work. Yes, she used a GLP, but she listened to the protein guidelines. And I will tell you, I see this more often than not. It is possible to lose weight and not lose muscle. So I am not a trainer. I think it's well worth the money if you can, to find somebody that can teach you how to exercise if you've never exercised before. What I can tell you and what I tell my patients is go slow, don't hurt yourself, and find exercises you enjoy. I think we inhibit ourselves because we say we don't have time and we say that's a lot of work. There was a gym I used to go to that was fantastic, best workout I ever had in my life. But I had to eat an hour before I went there. That hour was grueling, and if I didn't prepare right, I wouldn't go. Well, that's not good for me because I still need to exercise. So what I tell my patients is, can you do one thing for me? And I'm going to tell all of you guys, can you, if you're not working out already, can you go to a gym for 10 minutes 3 times this week? I don't care if you lift up a barbell once and go to the sauna for the other 8 minutes. Walking in there and doing something is winning. And if you do it, you've broken that seal. You'll see that you'll continue to grow from there. And honestly, that may be the thing that keeps you going versus if you have to think about going for an hour 5 times a week and you don't have that time, you may never do it. The other part of that is you'll find that when you exercise, even if you're working 8, 10, 12-hour days, you'll find you're more efficient. That exercise helps with blood flow, with cognition. You're gonna whatever you do, you're gonna do a little bit better. So I think that exercise is the best way to increase your peptides. And I put something on Facebook this week. All the best peptides in life are free. You don't need to pay for peptides. Go exercise. So if you wanted like an idea, some recommendations are that you do resistance training 2 to 3 times a week. And they say you should be at 60 to 80% of your one rep max, right? Don't start there. Start very low, get used to it, enjoy it, go back. And then zone two cardio is where you can run or exercise with a conversational pace. Like I can talk to you guys like this and still exercise. They recommend you do that about 150 minutes per week. And that's where you're going to get really good fat metabolism, like, um, sugar uptake into the muscle. You can also get that with high intensity training. It just will happen a lot quicker. You don't need as much high intensity training. And I guess the benefit for high intensity training might be better mitochondrial function. So they suggest if you can add that, do it in 3 to 8 minute bouts, but do not add that if you're just starting to work out. Wait 6 to 8 weeks before you start that. And then balance and stability are so important. If you can't balance on one foot, how are you going to put your underwear on? And part of why we want to live longer is so that we live independently, that we're able to function on our own. So trying to do things like one leg lunges, or again, it doesn't make sense to exercise and then you get a disc out where you're not able to work out. So do it with a trainer. Try to go slow. Do something just to build your muscles. And then protein is key. So here's some ratios. They don't really matter. Increase your protein. Talk to your doctor. Talk about what your medical conditions are. Find that regimen that works for you and push the limits a little bit. You can't eat all the protein in one sitting. It's not going to work. You won't absorb it. So it should be divided over 5 meals. Again, you could try to find leucine-rich sources, eggs, fish, dairy. I don't care as long as you're eating enough protein. And then vitamin D deficiency can prevent muscle production. So you might want to check that. I live in Michigan. I really don't check it. I just tell all my patients, you're going to have lower vitamin D in the winter because the sun's not out. Just take a higher dose in the winter and then take a pause from it. Why do I tell them to take a pause? It's a fat soluble vitamin. Too much of it can be toxic if you take too much. So, let's move on to the next step. Mindfulness, it's not easy to eat that protein if you skip breakfast, go to work 4 hours, you get hungry, and then they cater food and you're in the kitchen and you don't have any food choices but the pizza they brought in there. So, in order to eat that much protein, you need to be mindful. It might mean that on a Sunday night you're cooking for the week and creating little packages. I tell my patients, wake up 10 minutes early, eat breakfast, make it large, take a snack, 2 snacks, and a lunch to work, and then come home for dinner. So all you're doing is you're planning for that lunch and those 2 snacks. You can batch cook proteins, and then I always focus on the protein first and then worry about the rest of your calories afterwards if you're counting calories. The protein, if you eat protein before a carb, it helps you, and vegetables and fiber, it helps you with that sugar metabolism better. And if you're on a GLP, for example, you're not going to have as much appetite. So make sure you get the good stuff in first. I don't tell people to restrict carbs. If they eat as much protein as I tell them to eat, they don't have anything left for too many carbs. And then keep your kitchen stocked. I mean, if you've got plenty of proteins in your fridge, you'll have good choices to pick and you won't be eager to grab the kids' snacks, which I can do sometimes. So, the action plan, just a few things. Start strength training 2 times per week. Maybe eat 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram per day. You guys, I don't think I have to say this, but if you've got some condition where you're not supposed to be eating that much protein, please, and even so, please just consult with your doctor before starting any of these regimens. And then write your own Centenarian Decathlon list. Be mindful. And then, I ask about InBody testing, but that's not necessary. If there's a way for you to do body composition, whether it's DEXA or InBody, do it. Some gyms like Lifetime offer it there. Grab it, talk to your doctor about it, and see what you can learn. We're constantly learning. So I hope this week you guys will all try to do a little bit more exercise, and I hope this is helpful. If it's helpful, let Signature MD know.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Zaid. That was some really fantastic information, and I know it's going to be helpful for everybody. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to share this with us. For all of our attendees, as always, reach out to your personal Signature MD affiliated physician if you have any questions about muscle mass maintenance or anything else that Dr. Zaid mentioned today. This presentation will be put available on the member programs page in a week or so. So if you would like to rewatch it, you can check back in. And our next webinar is scheduled tentatively for September. So stay tuned for details in your inbox. From all of us at Signature MD, thank you so much for joining us and have a fantastic rest of your week.